is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com, coming to you, coming at you from the remote hinterlands of the Wabash River Valley, where the hogs, the frogs, and the dogs keep up a racket all night long. I'll go to, Lord willing, go to the laws of nature here, the elementary catechism on the Constitution. We're getting close to the end. I'm on page 73. Catechism, that's a series of questions and answers. If you grew up a Lutheran, a Romanist, a Presbyterian, in the Dutch Reformed tradition, the German Reformed tradition, those two about the same, you had creeds, and you also had a catechism. A catechism. Anglican, catechism. Methodists are called Methodists because of they were disciplined in methodology. Other things too, but that was key. That's why people called them Methodist. John Wesley, at one time they practiced the catechism. The group I grew up in had a catechism. They didn't pay much attention to it, but they had one. Well, this is a good one. It's on the Constitution of the United States, written by a clergyman, Arthur J. Stansbury, published the year 1828. Question. Ask here, trial by jury has been explained. The men who compose the jury must be of the same state, of the same district, where the offense is said to have been committed. He must be fully informed of the nature of the charge brought against him and how it came to be made. That is what our Constitution of the United States says, and that's the common law doctrine. Our Constitution is just a brief of how our common law applies to government. Not you, not me. No. Government. And it says, our Constitution says government can do this and government can't do that. That's what it says. That's all it says. That's all it's about. But if they're going to charge, government's going to charge somebody with a crime, of course, the grand jury is part of our common law tradition. They just can't decide to do it in the federal courts. No, they got to get the grand jury to agree. And once that happens and the grand jury says, yes, you may take this man to trial, then at trial, you, my friend, I don't care who you are. I don't care whether you're a citizen of the United States, an alien here without against the law, illegal alien. I don't care who you are. Wherever the government of the United States acts, our Constitution applies, and whoever the government of the United States acts against, our Constitution applies. People talking about, well, they can torture those guys over there. They're not citizens of the United States. We got a technical word for that here in America. The abbreviation is BS. Bottom sediment. Sediment with a D, as in Delta. Sediment, not sentiment. I think I said sentiment. Sediment. I was going to say that other thing it stands for, but in the oil field, it stands for bottom sediment, BS, we call it. You got to get rid of it. It hampers production. It settles in the bottom of the saltwater tank, right by the well. If you don't get rid of it, it'll fill it up. Just like BS, the other kind of BS, it just fills up the barn. Pretty soon you can't even walk through the door without banging your head on the overhead transom. Boom! Because you're too lazy to clean out the barn. Well, people that say, well, they're not citizens of the United States, Constitution doesn't apply. Or here's another one. They are combatants, foreign combatants, so the Constitution doesn't apply. That's not true either. That has never been true. That is not true. That's a lie of the Bushes and the Obamas and the Clintons. That's a lie of the evil empire. No. Oh, to get this point across. This country will pay. God will make this country pay if they torture people and then use silly, well, we got them out of the United States down to Gitmo. We can do anything we want to them. No, that's not true either. Gitmo is property of the United States anyway. That's a silly argument. Number two, even if it wasn't property of the United States, wherever this Justice Joseph Story said this, he's right. His commentaries on the Constitution, he was Justice, U.S. Supreme Court, advocate of our common law, one of the strongest we've ever had. I'm quoting from his commentaries on our Constitution. The protections that the Bill of Rights um, provide, or provide, are apply anywhere the government of the United States chooses to act, anywhere in the world, and against whom, anywhere in the world, and any person they choose to act. Remember the case of there are about I forget how many, or less than a half dozen young German men during the war. They had been to the United States and they could speak English. They had worked in the United States in the steel industry and other industries. And the war started, they were at home, and the Nazis tapped into them and said, "We're going to train you for a special mission. You speak English good, we can get you into America. You can blend into society, get a job, and blow up their war material industry, destroy it with explosives and bombs." And so they trained them very well, put them on a submarine, deposited them on the East Coast. The Civil Patrol, people volunteered to walk the beaches back then with whistles and stuff, caught them. Some of them ran, they all ran. He reported to the authorities and they got away. One fella had worked in Chicago. He went to Chicago and immediately, they went straight to the police and the sheriff and said, "I was sent here by the Nazis. I'm here to tell you and report what happened. And this is what happened. And we're not we're not going to blow up anything." What did our government do to them? Executed all of them. Is that right? Well, let me put it this way. Do the constitutional protections apply if they chose to try them? Yes. What they chose to do was kill them. Roosevelt chose to kill them. He said, "We will make an example of these men. I don't care if they're good or bad. We're going to kill them, and that'll send a message, and that'll be good." And what's a few lives sacrificed for the overall good? That's the left wing attitude, isn't it? Everybody must conform to the majority. And the majority was all for killing them, so let's just kill them. And they did. But what they did first was they had a show trial. Was it according to our common law? No. They blackened all the windows in the building. No light was allowed in, no sunlight. Nobody could look in. The press wasn't allowed. Was that proper? No, not even if it was a martial court. That wouldn't have been proper. Martial law. Our martial law courts here are different than other countries in that we still impanel a jury in a martial law court. That's kind of weird, but we do. And we impanel a jury of peers, only military men who understand the situation. If they'd have convened a martial law court, they would still had a jury, but we don't really know what all happened because it was a secret proceeding. But I do know this. I have read the record of the men after they were convicted, of the jury or whoever came back against them, and they all expressed their extreme gratitude to the United States and said it for having afforded them what they considered a fair trial. A fair trial. I don't get it, friends. Was it worth it? Is it worth it to sacrifice? Does our Constitution of the United States apply? No, as Justice Story says, to everywhere the Constitution is utilized, against everywhere the government of the United States chooses to act, anywhere in the world, and against anyone they choose to act. I knew fellows that were in country in Vietnam that murdered a lot of people. Yeah. They were commies anyway. Shoot them in the head. Throw them out of the helicopter. No, that's evil. And they did those kind of things. I'd hear them talk about it. Were they telling the truth or just bragging and trying to act like they were something really tough? I think they were the ones I knew. I think they were telling the truth and getting away with it. And I'd read other accounts. Here's the point, friends, the applicable take home point, takeaway point. You violate the law of God respecting your enemies. You violate the law of God respecting your friends and your neighbors and your kin. There's a penalty. There's always a consequence, whether you're Christian or not. That's why the Christian man or woman ought to be dead set on doing all he or she can to learn and safeguard and do the law of God, the expressed will of God, what he wants, because it makes your life go easier and it gives glory to your Maker. That's why he gave you the new birth, so he would have a people with a new heart, a new inclination, a new desire to want to do that instead of wanting to do what you want to do. Run to riot, have fun, decide what's right and wrong for yourself and screw your life up. No, no. God is the giver of final outcomes. Well, that's what Stansbury is saying here. Well, question. Suppose he knows of persons who could prove him not guilty. We're talking about the defendant, the man that the grand jury has indicted, sent him to trial. Suppose he knows of persons who could prove him not guilty of the charge, but they live far, far away and are unwilling to attend the trial. They're afraid because they think if they, and this really happens, if they testify in this man's favor, that the government will come after them. This happens often in tax cases, often in terrorist cases. Now, I've been in federal court back in after 9/11. It was kind of shocking to me in Podunk, America. They tried to put a federal court there. How many Arab terrorists were being tried in those local courts? And then I discovered in the little town close to me, I had one gas station in town, one gas station, and that gas station had a place you could go in there and buy donuts and hot dogs and all that kind of stuff. It was on a side road. It wasn't on the interstate, but it had that one little place there. And back after 9/11, the Islamic folks started buying up gas stations. Remember that? Well, we lived in a place where there were no people different than us that lived there for a few hundred miles around, pretty near, except at Terre Haute. Terre Haute I say, about 40 miles away. There were different kind of people there, but where I lived, that wasn't part of the scenery. There were no Jewish people. There were no people that were of African descent, people of color. They're just your regular old wasps, white Anglo-Saxon kind of people, all mixed up, of course, like most of us are, but just white folk, as we say. Christian folk went to little country churches. The other day I got to thinking how many country churches were around where I lived, all over the countryside, and I got a map up. You can get anything on the internet. It was shocking. I knew there were a lot. Every road you go down, you'd see another country church and maybe a cemetery with it. I was looking up places, and they all had names like Butternut, Willow Creek, White Oak, Bluegrass, Willow Hill, Jack Oak. All the churches around where I live, they named the church after some kind of tree nearby. At Jack Oak, I used to go to revival meetings at Jack Oak. They called it Jack Oak because there was a lone jack there. Lone jack. What's a lone jack? Well, Jack Oak trees are a certain kind of oak, and they're kind of like sycamore trees. You don't find groves of Jack Oak trees. I don't know why this is, but Jack Oaks, Jacks for short, we call them. They'll be lone jacks, alone by themselves. There was a famous battle in Missouri during that awful war between the border wars, during the war between the North and the South, a place called Lone Jack. Well, there are a lot of places called Lone Jack because people say, oh, well, let's build a church house here. Let's build a school here. We'll put a general store here because there's a jack oak tree there. And then they call it Lone Jack, just to stress the idea that the jack oak's always alone. Lone Jack, famous battle. Well, Jack Oak, we didn't have anybody else around. Oh, there were no different cultures at all. Of course, I got introduced to all that later on. But here this fellow from the other side of the world buys this gas station. We thought that was kind of odd. I'd go in there and say, why don't you go to church out here? I'd tell this Arab fella there. And there's a house right next to the gas station where they bought that and they lived there. So I'm talking to one of the neighbors at my mom and dad's. He came over to bring some eggs because he had more chickens he knew what to do with. He's quite a storyteller, truck driver. He got telling stories about something that happened in town. He said his daughter was at the high school and the kids at little tiny high school, they graduate 30, 40, well, more like 25 to 35 every year. But the children would come over to this gas station because that was the only place in town you could buy a hot dog or a donut, and that they'd eat health food like that for dinner, as you can imagine. So they just like to come over there, and they got over there, and the place was closed. And there were a bunch of men there with automatic weapons, he said, his daughter said, and they had these SUVs with black windows were all blacked out, and they wouldn't let them in. Come to find out, this Arab that bought this place was running a cell group of young men coming in from the Arab countries, and they caught a bunch of them out by the tank farm. We live in an oil field, and the largest tank farm above ground oil reserve in the world was there outside this little town, out in the middle of nowhere. That's the best place to put an oil reserve above ground because the darn thing blows up. See, it won't hurt. It will reduce the damage, the collateral damage. That's why it was out there. But they were out there taking pictures. They were terrorists. It was a cell group of terrorists. Right in that little town. Well, I found out there were cell groups of terrorists all over our lily white flyover America: Nebraska, Kansas, Indiana, Ohio, Illinois, Kentucky, Missouri, Michigan, Minnesota. They're all over. They were at that time. That was about 20 years ago. Well, I went into court and I found out, yeah, these guys are here. And of course, they end up trying them where? Where the offense was said to be committed. If any of you, and I know some of you have, you say so in the chat, some of you have been in jail. Some of you have been arrested. And if they arrest you, federal or state charge, you're going to go first to what prisoners call county. County. Well, that means that's short for county jail. If the feds arrest you, you're going to go to county jail, and the feds will pay the sheriff and pay them at least $1 million a year, even in the smallest counties, to house their prisoners. That's how they control the sheriffs in America, by the way. I mean, across the board, over 3,000 sheriffs, they control them all to varying degrees. Money, see, money. That's what keeps the evil empire going. Well, they put them in little county jails, and the feds put them in there until they figure out what they're going to do with them, try them in federal court. I go into federal court, waiting my turn to go up for a case, and here be some Arabs up there that were indicted and being taken to trial for terrorists. And if they got convicted in these little tiny, no place communities, they go to prison for life. All over America, that was going on. All over America. It wasn't in the newspapers. That thing that happened in that little town was in no newspaper. It wasn't on any television station or radio station. Why? Why not? Why not? Yeah. Strange things are done in the midnight sun. Oh boy. Well, the men who compose the jury are to be from the same state and the same district that was aforehand drawn out. And that in county jail, if you go to county, you'll find out the way prisoners talk about it, or people that are accused of crimes. They'll ask you, they'll say, "Hey, where'd you catch your case? Where did you catch, CATCH, your case?" That means, where were you arrested? Where is it that the government is accusing you of having committed this crime? Because wherever that is, you will be at trial at that place, you see. The nearest federal courthouse, if it's a crime under the Constitution of the United States. That's what he's saying here. And he's just going over the fundamental things about the Constitution. Why is it important? Why is it important? Indispensably important to freedom that you're tried in the place where the crime you're accused of is said to have been committed. One reason is because you're entitled to a jury of your peers that are impaneled from that place. You know, I was tried. You've heard me say this. Tried. I was tried. A funny thing, I'll tell you. Funny, odd. I was tried, and it was shocking as we were impaneling the jury. And it was, of course, a federal district is larger than a county, of course. But it was shocking to me how many people were in the jury pool that were dismissed because they knew about me, knew about my family, were from the community, knew somebody else involved in the case, not me, a witness or something. The world's smaller than we. Of course, I'm from a small community, I guess. I ran for Congress there, and we were the largest congressional district east of the Mississippi, geographically 27 counties. 27 counties, large as some states, larger than some states. Why? Well, not many people live there. You know, every congressional district has, theoretically, according to the last census taken, the same number of people. Every congressional district. That's the rule that they follow now. I don't know that it's a good rule, but that's what they're doing now. It gives opportunity for what we call gerrymandering. Gerrymandering. What is gerrymandering? Have you ever seen a salamander? Salamander. We used to catch them when we were boys. They live in the mud in the spring. You can find them in mud puddles. You can find them out in the fields in the mud after a rain. You can find them down at the creek in the mud along the bank. They're called salamanders. Well, a gerrymander is a kind of a salamander. And when you look at them, if they're just sitting there, of course they freeze. They don't tremble like we do. There's no shake, no tremble, no nothing. They are frozen and they don't want to be seen. When they stop, you've got a shape that is weird. You got these feet sticking out, toes sticking out, and you got this long tail, and it's kind of weird looking, and it's crooked, it's going this way. There are congressional districts that look like a gerrymander. That's why it's called gerrymandering. Not a good thing. uh, when they used to be a congressman in any state ran statewide. Every congressman and every senator ran statewide. A better rule. That was the original Constitution. But the point I'm making is this. It is important. If you're going to have a jury that understands who you are, you need a jury that is from where you're from, where you caught your case, where you were living. Because you all live there, you understand the culture there, and the culture is different everywhere you go in America. This is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com, coming to you, coming at you from the remote hinterlands of the Wabash River Valley, where the hogs, the frogs, and the dogs keep up a racket all night long.